Donald Trump's down row doctrine with why he went to Iran, why we went to Venezuela, and what he's going to do next, it's crystal clear. You can now start to see how he's aggressively moving in to a pivot for a full global reset. This morning at 10 a.m., the United States Navy put a blockade down in Iran. No incoming, no outgoing traffic. This was a result of pretty much failed negotiations with the Iranian leaders and J.D. Vance and team over the weekend. No big deal, because if you look at this strategy, this is exactly what the United States did with Venezuela. When you block all commerce, you starve the nation economically. You then either bring those leaders back to the table where they have absolutely no leverage, or you take over the country. Let's walk through, though, what's also happening, because as you start to see the pieces of this puzzle go together, you can see exactly where Trump's going to go next. So as I said earlier, you can see that we're watching the world's most powerful reset. Western Europe is fully dependent now on anybody other than themselves in sourcing liquefied natural gas and oil. Well, where are they going? I'm going to show you where they're going. But all of the importers who were now getting oil from Iran or Venezuela, well, then now they can get it from the United States. Latest ship traffic, Fox News outlined this morning, you can see now that there's over 121 empty tankers that are making their way now straight into Texas. The value of this, if each one of those filled up to the brim, is about $50 billion at today's market rate. That's just the tankers in the last, say, 3 to 5 days that now started veering their intentions into Texas. This, of course, doesn't mean that all of these tankers weren't going to come anyways, but the greater majority were planning on sourcing their oil from Iran or other areas within the Middle East. But this reset is also a direct front to what the BRICS nations were doing. As you see, the BRICS strategy, they were doing a currency and a precious metal strategy, a rare earth strategy, as well as an oil strategy. Donald Trump took the oil strategy completely off the table. But let's look specifically at what's going to happen with Iran and when it's going to happen, because it's devastating what this blockade is going to do. These numbers are loosely correct. Or directionally correct. I'm not going to put my name fully on it. But as you can see here, here's 10 bullet points on what economically is about to happen because of this blockade. The Strait of Hormuz in this blockade would cost Iran in the neighborhood of about $276 million a day in just lost exports, and disrupt in the neighborhood of 160 million imports. So the total damage per day with this blockade that just started hours ago is 435 million a day, or 13 billion a month. This is crippling for Iran. But the other piece of this puzzle, as you start to look down some of this math, is just taking their crude oil fields offline. This is dangerous because as weeks turn into months of not being able to get rid of that oil and sell it on the world market, well, those oil fields start to dry up. You start to have to put necessary maintenance onto those drills, because ultimately what happens is water backfills where the oil should be getting pulled out, and this messes up the wells altogether. It takes more than a couple weeks, but the point in the matter is that if this isn't addressed quickly by Iran, they're in deep trouble. So again, crude oil with this blockade, approximately $1.5 million a day is taken off the table. Petrochemicals with Iran, they exported about $20 billion a year, or about $54 million a day. All of that's gone. Non-oil exports. You can see here, Iran's non-oil trade hit about $52 billion a year in 2025. Again, about 90 million a day. 90% of this would be blocked because geographically, when you look at Iran, obviously the waters where a lot of their trade and commerce took place, not in the mountainous ranges to the north. So anybody who is going to be accessing any of the Iranian exports now has to do it through the mountain range. Good luck. Secondly, or next point rather, over 90%, as I said, of Iran's trade went through the strait. Now that's gone. And then lastly, and this is what I was talking about earlier, that when you look at this impact that you have on the oil fields, the storage that's in the tanks presently in both Karg Island and elsewhere in Iran, it's about 13 days of commerce. It's gone. So now you have to believe that Iran's going to turn its attention to using that oil for themselves. It's going to last in the neighborhood of about 70 to 80 days. Then it's gone. But worse, if these oil fields totally go offline, you're looking at potentially permanent reservoir damage. Because again, this what happens is that water backfills those oil wells, and then now you no longer have an oil well. A mature oil well needs to keep going, or you're constantly fighting this water backfill. That's where they're at. Last point I want to throw your way, and then we'll go to what's next for Donald Trump with his Down Road Doctrine, is this. The Iranian currency, the rial, is in complete collapse. Massive hyperinflation. Again, it's right now pegged on the day that this blockade is going into effect at 47%. This is going to get way worse, way worse. So the Iranian authorities who turned down JD and friends over the weekend now have a full blockade on their southern front. That takes away all of their ability to exist economically. And at this point, if they don't negotiate with Donald Trump, they're in deep trouble. Because the second piece of this puzzle is this is exactly what Donald Trump did with Venezuela. When you have a naval blockade blocking in and out, at that point, you're in deep trouble. And again, this is what Donald Trump did with Venezuela. But where does he want to go next? Ultimately, the benefit of having these 121 tankers now go to Texas, hey, that's great. That's $50 billion potentially that we weren't going to get in oil trade. But where this is really going is resetting the vulnerability that the United States had with the BRICS nations and their movement that they were making. Again, with precious metals, with oil, and with currency. Donald Trump saw immediately the vulnerability with the petrodollar and what was going on during the Biden administration. And this direct move that Donald Trump is taking with drill baby drill, with getting Venezuela control and now Iranian control, all of the world is now paying attention. In fact, the Chinese delegates just this morning see exactly what's going on. And Donald Trump is offering, hey, send your ships over to the U.S. We'd gladly do trade with you. But the problem is this. If the whole Euro-Pacific strategy that Xi is putting into place is now dependent on Donald Trump's oil, well, look what he did there. He's, by addressing Venezuela and Iran, he's addressed 3 or 4 things all at one shot. All of these geopolitical strategies are where Biden and where Obama have failed. Not only to stand up to despots, but to try to make the dominating effect of having U.S. at the middle of global trade. They were just outsourcing everything. Donald Trump has stopped that. You haven't heard anything on Greenland recently. Wonder why. You haven't heard anything on Cuba recently. I wonder why. Because ultimately, what's going to happen, and see the timing of this, is that Iran has about 13 days to make their decision on what's going on. Donald Trump's also said this morning that he's willing to start strategic bombing during this ceasefire if he gets any indication that Iran is getting ready to make a move. Well, guess what? Of course they're going to make a move, because every day they're going to get more desperate. So ultimately, the transpiring effect and the downstream effect of this blockade is going to be decimating the Iranian economy and the ability of the Iranian leadership to hold back a color revolution. My guess is we're going to see one soon, within weeks. The next guess I have is that we're going to start to see a strategic move outside of just the 3 military bases that Donald Trump has right now. And in Greenland, he's making his move there. And lastly, what you're going to start to see is a total reset going into midterms with the geopolitical petrodollar vulnerability that we had. We had a massive problem on our hands with the uptick of the BRICS nations. Donald Trump is addressing that head on. I'm curious what you think. Did I miss anything in the analysis? Iran's on the ropes. They're declining JD's offer over the weekend. Not surprising. But what's going to be surprising, I believe, is the speed of the revolution that's about to happen in Iran. All by design. Venezuela Playbook 2.0. If you've yet to subscribe to America First Alerts, please do so. We'd love to have you along for the ride. And our very next story is one that you're not going to miss. What you see, and it's mind-blowing, is Donald Trump put out a number of endorsements over the last couple years going into the 24 election. Well, turns out some of those endorsements on those candidates is now backfiring, because now we have quote-unquote MAGA Republicans that are supporting an amnesty bill, all while our attention is overseas in the Middle East. That story, it's coming up next. You're not going to want to miss it.